At the end of 2020, I took some time off for the first time in like 3 or 4 months. The last couple months of the year was work nonstop. It was like working on this client project, working on this project for myself, preparing for my own book release, preparing for someone else's book release. Like, it was pretty much 24/7. There was never a point where I was like, you know, I can take a little break and just do what I want today. That just didn't exist. Until at the end of 2020, the last like 2 weeks, the week starting with like December 21st, I was like, I am gonna take some time off. I am gonna take some days where the main thing I do is sit on the couch and read some books. And it was glorious. And now I'm ready to return to my work and my career with a vengeance. So time off is good for you, friends. That's the one thing I'm going to say today. The other thing I'm going to say was that the Reindeer Readathon was so fun. Thank you so much to everyone who participated in it. Today I'm going to be going over the books that I was able to read for the Reindeer Readathon. I didn't quite finish all the prompts, and I know that, you know, not everyone did, and that's totally fine. As a team leader, I probably feel a little bit like a failure for how much I was not able to accomplish with reading, but I still got to read a lot of really good books that I'd been wanting to read for a long time, and I learned some new things about my own reading habits that I want to talk about. And I'm going to also talk about which books are getting full reviews, and I'm going to give a brief overview, and I'm just really excited. Thank you, by the way, so much to Eric of Break Even Books for running the Reindeer Readathon, for starting it last year, and then for running it again this year. You've done a great job with this. I'm so happy to be a part of it. And Team Stocking, you guys were fantastic. Congratulations to Team Snowflake for winning the Reindeer Readathon. You guys did fantastic. Good work. But yeah, let's get into the wrap-up.
Get you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should pick up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.
What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy. Welcome back to Savvy Writes Books. On this channel, we talk about books, writing, and small business owner life. Every Monday and Friday at 11 a.m. Central, I put out a new video, and today's Wednesday. And I'm putting out a video here too, so sometimes I do bonus videos on Wednesdays, and every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Central, I host the author sleepover where we get together and do some writing on a live stream. So head over to my live stream tonight if you're interested in that. I didn't have it for the past 2 weeks because, like I said at the beginning, I was taking some time off. But now I am back at it. This channel is going strong, and I'm really excited. So be sure to stop by tonight and we'll get some writing done together. It'll be great. The first book I read for Reindeer Readathon in the past month of December was for the Donner prompt. The prompt for Donner was a book with something hidden inside. So the book I read for that was Paper Daisies by Camille Myrick. She is a fellow author tuber. I'm going to go over this. I read a lot of author tuber books for this, which I love because my favorite genre in general to read is books written by my friends. I love reading books where I know the author and I can feel that connection. So this book is a collection of poetry, but it also had all of this art hidden inside, and I didn't realize, I knew that Camille was a poet, but I didn't know she was a visual artist as well, and her illustrations are just gorgeous, so it was fantastic to get to discover all of those hidden pieces inside of this book. I'm going to be doing a full review of this book when I do an AuthorTuber poetry review, so I'm working on reviews for AuthorTuber picture books and AuthorTuber poetry, since they're shorter books that I can kind of delve into there, but I've marked a bunch of poems that I really want to go into because I find them interesting. And I've been trying to read more poetry because I'm not great at poetry. Like, a lot of things about it are just not intuitive to me, and I don't understand, like, how do you determine where to make the line breaks? How do you determine how many syllables go in each line? And if you're doing a free-form poem, how do you determine where you want to put rhymes, if at all? And I know that to a lot of poets, it's like, well, that kind of depends on a lot of factors, and, you know, it's kind of up to you and all of that. So I know that I guess the fact that there's no rules almost makes it more intimidating. But I like poetry, and I want to understand it better and get to learn more about it and maybe try writing some in the future. So I've been trying to read AuthorTuber poetry collections because it's really cool to read poetry by people that I know, especially since poetry can be very personal personal to your own emotions and to your own life experiences. So it's kind of like you're getting a glimpse into someone's life and the way they think, and I think that's really cool. For this readathon, I tried to read a mix of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, and then I also tried to read within fiction a mix of genres. And this is where I learned a little bit about my reading habits and how I like to alternate types of books. So after I finished this first poetry collection, the second book that I read was a nonfiction book, and it was called It's About Damn Time by Arlan Hamilton. This book I read for the Cupid prompt, which is read a book in a genre that you love, one of the genres I love most, which if you've been on this channel for any amount of time, this should be no surprise to you. But my favorite genre is business books, nonfiction about business, where I can learn new things about business ownership and business practices and running a company and things like that. So this book is about Arlan Hamilton, who is the founder of the company Backstage Capital, which is a venture capital fund that seeks out women-owned, Black-owned, and LGBT plus owned companies to invest in. And I think that's fantastic. So in this book, Arlan Hamilton talks about the idea of being underestimated and what that means. And in general, in the business world, if you're, not a straight white man, if you have identities outside of that, you're generally going to be a little bit underestimated in the world of business, in Silicon Valley, in the world of startups and that type of thing. Just because when you think of the traditional startup company owner, you see some like nerdy white guy, right? That's just kind of like an image that a lot of people default to. And it's because that's who's been running the majority of things. So in this book, she talks about how she started up this company hoping to get people who were underrepresented in these business areas and getting their businesses seen and brought to the front. And what I liked about what she talked about with her company Backstage Capital is that a lot of times when we think of venture capital, we think of someone investing in like a new app or like a new like tech startup, a new company that's going to, do some kind of business to business tech relation or something like that. That's generally what I think people think of with venture capital. But in the past, I've thought about venture capital for my own company. I run a business called Forever Home Friends that produces picture books, stuffed animals, toys, and merch based on real rescue dogs and their journeys to adoption. And we give 10% of our profits to animal shelters. So that's my company. In the past, I've thought, do I want to seek out venture capital? Do I want to get an investor? And I've had a lot of people tell me, well, that's more for like tech startups, or that's more for somebody who's trying to start like an app or a type of technology that's going to be useful for the business world or the medical world or things like that. Or that my company kind of operates on too small of a scale to need VC. But I don't think that's always true. And I like that in this book, she talked about how some of the companies she invested in, she would invest in like curly hair care products companies, which y'all, I use a ton of those, so I get it. Like, so she'd talk about that, or she'd invest in like a beauty company, like things that are producing consumer products. So I thought that was interesting. If you're not a business person, you're probably bored out of your mind right now. I'm sorry. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars because what I noticed, which this book has the exact same problem that literally every business self-help book has, which is that it skips over the most crucial pieces of information. So when she talked about like starting up a venture capital company, and she talked about how she started off, she was homeless for a little while, she was sleeping in the floor of the airport, she was on welfare, like she talked about all of that, and it's like, that's amazing that she was able to break out of that situation and become a business owner. That's incredible. But I felt that there was a lot of pieces missing where she would talk about how she felt that she was often underestimated during that time in her life. And then she ran a company, and then she would talk about like lessons she learned while running the company. But I wanted to know what happened in between, like how did you initially make those connections with people who would help with the funding? Like, where did you go? How did you brainstorm ideas? Where did you physically walk to? Where did you get and I think this is not just this book. This is almost every business book I read skips over like the part that is the greatest barrier to business owners. And I don't get why. I think it just might be that once you've been running your company for a while, it's second nature to you. So you start to think of the advice in terms of like, oh, I learned this lesson from this thing, I learned this lesson, and then you try too hard to make the lessons broadly applicable to anyone who might be reading the book, when in reality, I want to read a variety of business books so that I can learn about the variety of ways that different companies have started. I did give this book 3 stars because there were a lot of good things about it. There were a lot of lines that I highlighted in it as like, oh, this is a really important thing to say. For example, she had these lines like, privilege is a hand-me-down heirloom, entitlement is something you procure and choose to wear. So when she's talking about like, you know, people who have some type of privilege in the fact that their identity is something that wouldn't cause them to be underestimated in the business world, that you can use that in a positive way to help other people instead of using it as a way to act entitled because entitlement is something you choose. I thought that was really a really important statement. She talked about how since her company was specifically providing investments to women, people of color, and the LGBT community. She had this sentence where it was like, there are still a lot of people who hear about anything that involves diversity or underrepresented groups and think it's about giving a helping hand. They see us as a subpar option that you choose to feel they've done something good. And she said, I wanted to tell them that I intended to run a for-profit business that could make both me and others very rich. I wasn't looking to give handouts. I was looking for return on investments. So I thought those lines were really important because there are a lot of times when people hear like, oh, this company wants to help this group of people. They're just trying to, you know, do like a charity or a handout. And that's kind of really insulting when in reality it's like, no, she's running a venture capital fund. She wants return on investment. So she's going to invest in companies that legitimately are going to be profitable and bring her back a return on investment. It's not just for feeling good or something. So I thought those lines were really important. But at the same time, I read this book wanting to learn a lot more about venture capital and about what it's like as a business to pitch to a venture capital fund and to seek an investment. So I was hoping she would talk more about what like a company that she would choose to invest in, what qualities they had, how companies approached her, how you break into that world of finding an investment in the first place. Like, I was just hoping to learn more of the intricacies of the process that I could apply to my life as a business owner. And it didn't really give me that. It gave me more of like overarching, I guess, philosophical lessons. But again, like a lot of business books have this problem. I would rather, guys, if you're out there and you're going to write a business book, I would rather you write a book that's specific to your situation and you don't try to make the lessons super like overarching, and then I will just read a ton of them and I will pick the lessons that apply. You know, I just feel like this whole concept of trying to make things apply to too many people, it ended up having some of those business guru magnetic poetry platitudes in it. I will not shrink myself to make someone else more comfortable, which was like, I remember calling out Rachel Hollis for plagiarizing that quote from someone else. So like, this is like the 3rd time I've heard that quote repeated in slightly different words. This is not helpful. So overall, 3 stars to this book. I am glad that I read it. Next up, I read Lights Out by Joey Paul. I read this book for the prompt of comment, which was a book you find intimidating, and I also used it for Christmas Star, which is the bonus you get for reading a book over 500 pages long. So this book is, I think, 550 pages long. That was one reason it intimidated me, because generally I like books on the shorter side. I like books about 200 pages, 250, sometimes 300 or 400 is fine. But like big, thick books like this, I find a little intimidating sometimes. But that wasn't the only reason I found it intimidating. I also found it intimidating because I am someone who's very prone to having an existential crisis when I think about the concept of death and being no more and no longer existing in this universe. It's a thing that causes me significant anxiety. And in this book, it's about a society where people are sent to die when they're 60. So the idea is that the world has become populated to over 10 billion people, and there was a giant war over resources. In the end, what used to be the United Kingdom and has now turned into the United English Cityships, this section of the world has decided that the best way to make sure everything stays equal is to regulate how old people can get. Because if you can't get past age 60, there's no medical resources that are spent on you, there's no food that's spent on you. Instead, people are divided up equal amounts of food, and there are medical advancements so significant that when you're 25, you can basically look like you're 25 for the rest of your life because you don't age physically as much anymore. However, when you're 60, you are immediately sent to die. And the main character of this book is a woman named Locke, and she works for the company or not the company, she works for the government in a building that administers the death serum to people. So when people turn 60, they come into this building and she gives them an injection to kill them. It is scary as hell, dude. But over the course of this book, what she learns is that some people might not be as young, like some people might not actually be 60 when they're sent to die, and that it's part of a big government conspiracy. A woman comes in one day saying, hey, I was called here today to get my death injection, but I'm 35. Like, there must be an error. And everybody has, like, a chip in their eye that gets scanned to determine it, and her ID and her chip in her eye didn't match. And at the end of the day, you have to default to the chip. And it's like, the chip can't be hacked, right? But it turns out the chip can be hacked, and Locke didn't know about this, and it's part of, like, this bigger government conspiracy that goes all the way up to the king, because the king has been, like, trying to give people who have been beneficial to society, like who have made scientific advancements, he's been giving them extra years to continue that work, theoretically that it's for the greater good. However, that doesn't keep things equitable, and it makes people not want to die at 60, especially if they didn't already want to die that young. So it's this whole concept about life and death and government conspiracy and are all lives created equal and things like that. Dude, there were so many themes in this book. I loved this book. I will probably do a full review of it because I love doing full reviews of AuthorTuber books. Joey Paul is one of my favorite AuthorTubers. She is a very kind and amazing person. She's been very supportive of my channel, and I've loved being friends with her, and she's done a review of my book Sculpt Yourself, and I think that's cool. So she and I are friends. She's been on my AuthorTube sleepover live stream. And I have more of her books now. She has this series called Dying Thoughts that I'm going to start reading. So she has like 17 books out, I think. So she's incredible. And this book was just a wild ride that gave me a million existential crises, but it kept my interest the entire way through. And I was flying through it because I was like, dude, what is gonna happen next? So highly recommend Lights Out by Joey Paul. I'm giving it 4 stars. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars, and this is such a stupid and petty thing, but there were just too many commas, and I know that's such a stupid reason. Like, I explicitly know that that's a stupid reason to take off a star, and that's not the only reason. There were a couple plot things that I wished had happened a little different, or that I thought would have made sense in a different way, which again, I'll probably do a full in-depth review where I go through my book rating system for it. But it's just like, there were like lots of commas in almost every sentence, and it kept throwing me off. But again, I feel like most people won't care about that, and you probably shouldn't. Normally I don't care about things like that, but it was just really frequent. But it really doesn't matter. Anyway, this book, I highly recommend it. It's really, really good. The next book that I read was The Cyborg Tinkerer by Meg Latour, and I read this for the Rudolph prompt, which was a book where the main character doesn't seem to fit in. So in this book, Gwen is the main character, and she is a ship tinkerer on an airship. Okay, so I guess I need to explain the world in this book first, which is that this is kind of like a sci-fi steampunk crossover. So there's these ships like this one, right? They've got engines and they've got sails because they're spaceships and water ships combined. So there's like docks at the water. The ship takes off and zooms off into the air, and then they're in space. And she lives in the Crescent Star system. I am definitely going to be doing a full review of this book. One, because the author Meg Latour, who runs the channel iWriterly, she sent me an ARC of the book, and I've been meaning to do a full review on my channel. So I got this from the ARC. So I guess disclaimer, I was provided an ARC in exchange for my honest opinion. So the Gwen is the ship tinkerer, and then she gets a brain tumor and is about to die. They'll have to remove a chunk of her brain. She's gone blind from the brain tumor, you know, covering up one of her eyes. The only way she'll survive is if she can get a cyborg, like, inner skull and eye implant. But cyborg implants have in the Crescent Star system because Emperor is too concerned that, like, cyborgs could, theoretically, if you give people too many cyborg implants, you could create, like, super soldiers that could create an army that could dominate. So he's, like, trying to keep things in check, but it's also, like, now people who get cyborg implants, if they need those implants to save their life, they just have to die, because if they get the cyborg implant, now they're gonna go to jail and get in trouble, and then the person who's been manufacturing the implants will get put to death, and it's, like, really difficult situation. So anyway, Gwen starts out as an outsider because she's about to die, and then she becomes another outsider because she gets a cyborg implant in her eye, and now she can no longer return to the ship where she was working because she can't exist in regular society as a partial cyborg. So instead, she joins a cyborg circus. And at the cyborg circus, she, like, kind of fits in, kind of doesn't, because she's, like, the new guy there. So basically it's a book where she feels like an outsider in a few different parts, and I Really liked this book. I think I'm giving it 4 stars. There were some things I didn't like about it, but there were most things I did like about it. And I'm going to do a full review of this because I've seen a lot of people having incredibly mixed feelings about this book. Some people saying, you know, it's thrilling and exciting and I'm fucking in love with it, and other people saying I didn't like this book at all because it was confusing and I had problems with whatever. And I personally genuinely really do like this book. I had a few issues with elements of the world building and thought that there were things that could have been explained more and fleshed out more, but there were some things about this that I just loved so much. I don't want to get into spoilers. There's going to be no spoilers in this, so I'll go into some of the things I really loved when I can get into the spoiler section. But I loved Gwen as a character. I thought she was fascinating, and I thought she was hot, dude. I pictured her as looking like Asami from The Legend of Korra. I don't know if that's how she actually looked, but the way she was described made me think she probably kind of looked like her, but like with a cyborg eye. So then, those were the only books that I ended up finishing. So those were the only books I got points for. However, I kept reading afterwards. Obviously, you know, after the readathon ended, what I read then doesn't give me points. But I still wanted to talk about the books that I'm currently reading that are holdovers from the Reindeer readathon, because I started to learn a lot about my reading habits. So the next book I picked up to read was Songs of Autumn by Lauren Severe. And I'm in the beginning of it, haven't finished it yet, because one thing I learned about my reading habits is I need to alternate fiction and nonfiction, or I need to alternate types of fiction. So, for example, I had just read right in a row, I had read Lights Out, which had this futuristic sci-fi world, and then I'd read The Cyborg Tinkerer, which was like steampunk in space. So I'd had 2 different worlds built in front of me. Sometimes certain elements would kind of mesh together in my brain, and then I'd be like, oh wait, no, that was in that other book that I just read. So then when I additionally started Songs of Autumn, this book also has similar elements where this book is like, this is a fantasy book where magic is a non-renewable resource in the kingdom of Aegis, and Liz, it has to be sacrificed. And so it's like a thing where it's like we're dealing with like a kind of a science parallel in a fantasy world, and also a character who knows the date of their death, kind of like in this one. So it just started to mesh together for me, and I said, you know what, I really want to enjoy this book and fully delve into it for what it is and not get my brain jumbled. So I'm going to take a break from this one for a little while and come back in a week or so. So Lauren, I am so excited to finish reading this book. You just wait. I'm giving it a full review when I'm done. And instead I started reading The Cult of Trump by Stephen Hassan, which is a nonfiction book. So guys, this is what I learned about my reading habits. I need to break up fiction and nonfiction. I need to break up like contemporary fiction with sci-fi and fantasy. I can't have too much of the same thing in a row, or else my brain starts to go, woo, you know? That might just be me. But this book, I'm actually working on not necessarily somewhat of a full review, but I'm reading this book for research for a bigger video that I'm going to do. Wait, I didn't say what prompts they were for. I'm so sorry. Songs of Autumn was for Vixen, which was either a book with a fox on the cover or a book with a strong female character. So this was for the strong female character prompt. The Cult of Trump was for the Blitzen prompt, which is a book with some sort of struggle, because this book talks about, you know, the struggle of not necessarily just American politics, but also the struggle of being within a cult, and also the struggle of how politics and political leaders can turn into cult-like things. And this book, okay, so I'm working on a video about whether or not political parties in the US are cults. And I don't think in that video I'm going, like, spoiler, I don't think I'm going to come to a definitive yes or no answer. I think I'm going to explore different ideas about it. I'm working on this video with the channel The Antibot. A lot of you guys have seen me collab with her in the past. We've done anti-MLM videos talking about pyramid schemes and cults and things like that in the past. I love her channel so much. And I approached her because during the 2020 election, I was seeing so much behavior regarding, and it wasn't just Trump supporters, it was a lot of people. I was seeing a lot of people act in ways that seemed reminiscent of what I'd seen in my research regarding cults, my research regarding pyramid schemes and the emotional manipulation that kept people there. Just seeing a lot of behavior regarding that, regarding election politics and things like that. And I get that the stakes were high, dude. I don't fault anyone for how they acted, but at the same time, I was just wondering, is there some parallel here? And she was like, well, have you read the book The Cult of Trump? And I was like, no. So I immediately went and bought it. And so it's by Stephen Hassan. So if you guys don't know him, he developed the cult BITE model. The BITE model is BITE. It stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional. And it's the model that if those pieces of your life are being controlled, you are in a cult. That's basically a way to determine, is this organization I'm part of? Is this relationship or group that I'm part of? Does this have cult elements? Does this have cult manipulation tactics in it? You can use that model to determine that. So in this book, he talks about how someone like Trump has exhibited similar qualities to cult leaders that he's known in the past. Stephen Hassan is a cult expert because he was actually part of the Moonies cult back in the 1970s, and I think that cult was from the Unification Church. It was like one of those big cults where it was all the crazy cult shit. So he draws parallels between a leader like Trump along with a leader like the leader of his cult, the Moonies, the leader, Jim Jones, who had run the Jonestown Massacre, where people, the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid came from, where they had the punch that was laced with cyanide and things like that. So he talks about all of these things. I'm not done with the book yet, but so far I'm finding it really fascinating, and I have a lot of things that I'm going to be thinking about when I go to discuss this whole, can political leaders become cult leaders? Are the concept of political parties in the U.S. or, I mean in other countries too, but I have only ever lived in the U.S., so I'm going to focus it there. But the idea of, this two-party system and the parties and the way we're expected to have party loyalty and loyalty to leaders and create fandoms around leaders, is this cultish? I kind of think it is. I don't know for certain if it is, but this book is giving me a lot of information and a lot of research about the ways that I can draw these parallels. So far, there are some things in this book that I do disagree with, but that's what I like about Stephen Hassan, is he explicitly says in the beginning, feel free to, you should disagree with parts of this book because this book will be biased from my perspective. And I like that because he knows how much, demanding that someone listen and believe everything you say can lead to cult behavior. So he's even apply it to me too, dude. If you listen and believe everything I say immediately, that's no better. And I appreciate that. And I feel the same way. It's and that's part of the whole information control thing, right? When you are told that you cannot seek information from certain sources, even if those sources are wrong, you should be able to listen to a source that you disagree with, and you should be able to think critically and debunk their arguments. And if you can't, then maybe there is something true there. But if it's false, then you should be able to say, you know what, I can prove this is false with this. You should be able to look at that, because there are going to be lies and there are going to be truth out there in the world, and you need to determine what's what instead of cutting yourself off from any type of source. I'm going to go into this further when I do a full review on this and a full video about cults and political parties. But as you guys know, I'm kind of like a hyper feminist, that kind of thing. I do watch conservative YouTubers sometimes. I think it's important to see the differences in viewpoints out there and understand where they come from and why, because if you don't understand where someone else's viewpoint comes from, you're not going to be successful in trying to work with getting to a new viewpoint, if that makes sense. If you segment yourself off from each other, each extremist viewpoint is only going to become stronger. That's how I see it, and this book seems to think the same thing. So I'm going to continue reading this, and I'm really excited to do a full video on this, because I think there are so many really interesting things to discuss. That is how far I got in the Reindeer Readathon. I did not get to Polish Chicago. I'm so sorry, guys. I told everyone of Prancer, which is a book with a map in it. I was so excited to read Polish Chicago, Our History and Our Recipes. I will read that book at some point, maybe for next year's Reindeer Readathon. Either way, Eric, thank you so much for organizing and running Reindeer Readathon. Congratulations again to Team Snowflake for winning. Thank you to Team Stocking for being wonderful and for having a great time reading, and for the wonderful group chats we had on Twitter. You guys are fantastic. I had a great time reading this past month, and I'm looking forward to continuing to read these books into January, even though the readathon's over. I'm still excited, and I'm glad I've learned some new things about my reading habits regarding fiction and nonfiction and poetry and how to balance it out and that kind of thing. What did you guys think of any of these books? If you've read them, what did you think of the Reindeer Readathon? Let me know how you did. All of that, leave me a comment below. I will see you guys on Friday at 11 a.m. Central for my big new video premiere to kick off 2021. But until then, don't forget to support small businesses. Have a great Wednesday, friends.
Hit you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.